Hi everyone, Dr. Schumann here to present on grammar key number 1, the verb to be. To be is our most common verb in English, so it is an important one to start off with. As you could see with this agenda, this lesson provides an overview of the verb to be, some insights from corpus linguistics, areas of first language interference, and suggestions for workbook exercises and teaching practices. To begin, Vols points out that this grammar key, the verb to be, is one of the first ones we usually teach, and usually found early on in textbooks. Why do you think that this is? Well, there is a corpus connection. Be is one of the most common verbs in English, so it makes sense to teach it early on. In addition, the verb to be makes for straightforward sentence constructions. At first, you might start with a basic exchange like, I'm from such and such. Where are you from? As students gain more proficiency, one mnemonic I've used to review the verb to be is on a cap. That is, you can connect the verb to be with words or expressions in categories that link to on a cap. You can have be plus occupation, nationality, age, color, adjective or attribute, preposition or place. For example, I'm a teacher, be plus occupation. Wei is Chinese, be plus nationality. I am not going to tell you how old I am, but that's another one. So on a cap is a simple mnemonic that you might use as a review for the verb to be, especially as students move from beginning to low intermediate. So part of this overview, one important thing for teachers to be aware of about our number one irregular verb is that be has 8 forms. That's 3 more than the 5 forms that most verbs have in English. When teaching students about the 5 flavors of verbs, I use the following descriptors, and I keep these on a set of cards that I can place on the bed of the whiteboard or hold up when trying to elicit structures from students. So first of all, we have be, the simple verb or base verb. Then we have verb plus s, which we use for the simple present tense, third person singular affirmative. And that's very challenging because we're one of the only languages that signals out third person singular affirmative as something different by adding the s. Third, we have v plus ing. This is going to indicate that the verb relates or expresses something expressive or continuous, or it could also be a present participle or a gerund, depending on how it's used inside of the sentence, that form. 4, we have what I call v plus ed1 for the simple past, or v plus ed2 for past participle, which could also be something perfect or something passive. Passive when it's combined with auxiliary be, perfect when it's combined with auxiliary have. Sometimes, when it's a regular verb, v plus ed1 is the same as v plus ed2. But with irregular verbs, you have column number 1 being your simple verb, column number 2, simple past, v plus ed1, and column number 3, v plus ed2. Okay, so how does this compare with the 8 forms of the verb to be? Well, be also has our simple or base verb. We use that with modals or as an infinitive. But when it comes to simple present tense, it's a little bit different because we don't have simply be for everybody, like I be, you be, or be plus s, he bees. Okay, what we have instead is am, is, or are. With adding ing to the verb be, that is regular. be becomes being, and we use that for progressive or continuous forms, present participle, or gerund. In the past tense, it's also a little bit different because we don't have simply one form of be plus ed1. We have was and were. Was being used with I, he, she, it. Were with you, we, they. And finally, for V plus ed2, we do have one past participle, then, which is used for perfect or passive forms. So, next step, slide number 6. There's an abundance of online material for teaching B, as well as materials found in most low-level textbooks. Here I've included one example where you can access a well-done slide share about the verb to be for students who are learning at an early level. And in addition, I've included a website from the University of Victoria, Canada, where you can find resources for all different grammar points, including the verb to be. This site is a tried and true one that I often refer students to. It's well organized with effective descriptions, examples, lessons, and tests. And these are differentiated by level. This is very helpful. Also, this particular site does not have any obnoxious ads, or it doesn't force you to sign up or register for anything, so it's one that I really like to recommend for my students. Next, the last point related to our overview. When you are teaching the verb to be, you will need to cover sentence structure, including affirmative, negative, and question structures. With affirmative and negative, in addition to pointing out word order and form choice, you will want to cover the use of contractions and reductions as a natural part of oral communication and sounding friendly. With questions, point out that short answers have a beat of 1, 2, 3. Yes, she is, or no, she isn't, etc. This pattern can then be compared later with other verb tenses you subsequently teach them. Yes, he does. No, he doesn't, for example. Okay, next step, I'm going to talk about some corpus findings. So, what did I find regarding corpus studies with the verb to be? Well, I started by doing some research in Google Scholar, and that was not so fruitful, unfortunately, because I think the category is pretty broad. I noticed that there were some learner corpus studies when I typed in verb to be in quotation marks and corpus. Learner corpora are studies that look at actual text samples from ELLs, and these could inform us about high-frequency errors that ELLs make with the verb to be. In reality, I think Folse has done a really great job for us with that, and I know that his teaching and writing is corpus informed. So I did not dive deeper into the learner corpora with the verb to be. I also came across a book that I thought was kind of interesting called Word Frequencies in Written and Spoken English, based on the British National Corpus, published in 2015. I could only see a little bit of the book because there was just a sample that came up linked with the publisher. But one thing I noticed in there, they talked about the frequency of color words, so I thought that might be interesting. You know, which color words associate with the verb to be, and we might assume, for example, it makes more sense to say be red, be blue, for example, before we start some of the less high-frequency color words. But in both cases, I did think this was great information for you to be sharing with you. However, then I started thinking more about COCA, and I went over to the Corpus of Contemporary American English. And when I got there, I decided to input each of the 8 forms of the verb to be to learn about frequency variations. And what did I find? The 2 most used forms of be in that 450 million word corpus of American English are is and was, both third person singular. The least frequent form is am. So what does this mean for me as a teacher of ELLs? Well, for one thing, it confirmed my intuition about having students personalizing less when writing, saying less often, I am, or I think, etc. But I was still surprised about the huge difference between am and is. Also, my intuition about the form being a less common form, was confirmed. So this is part of what I love about corpus findings. They enhance my confidence about what I tell students about English. Okay, next, what does Folse say about L1 interference with the verb to be? He identifies several common mistakes that ELLs make with be, and I have found this to be true. 1, sometimes students make agreement mistakes, especially after there, saying, for example, there is for both singular or plural. There is a lot of problems, for example. Or they make mistakes, they might be unclear about the difference between count and non-count nouns, saying something like furniture are instead of furniture is. Point 2, ELLs omit be and might say, I tired, for example. We can understand even without the verb, and so that might get overlooked. Point 3, because of L1 interference, certain expressions of be might be replaced with have, like I have 24 years old instead of I am. I hear that mistake often and persistently. 4, some languages do not always say the subject in a sentence, but in English we need to. Part of this is due to not having different verb forms for each of the subject categories. And 5, some students confuse the word order patterns in 3 sentence types of affirmative, negative, and question. Folse addresses specific L1 interference by language groups on pages 96 to 97. For now, I'm going to comment on Spanish as an example, since that is the L1 that I most commonly deal with. Folse states that having 2 forms of be in Spanish might challenge students, ser and estar. So far, that particular aspect has not seemed to be an issue for me. However, 2 other cases surely are. Point 2, L1 Spanish speakers replace be with have for things like age, as I mentioned, and that seems to be a persistent error. And 2, students often omit the subject pronoun, especially with it, and this results in fragments. Again, this error is one that persists, even for more advanced ELLs in their speaking as well as their writing. Okay, with this next slide, I'd like to point out a few recommendations for working with your workbook. The pages that cover this topic are 94 to 97, and you will find it generally easy. 4 exercises that might be of greater interest are 3.1.2, where you do some identifying of common student errors and matching them to categories. 3.1.6 talks about contractions and reductions. 3.1.7 asks you some questions about questions that I think are valuable. And 3.1.9 deals with errors with the verb to be in writing. And I think all 4 of those exercises could be helpful. The next couple of slides talk about teaching techniques, and Folse mentions these at the end of his grammar key, talking about